Morning's special edition of the LT&A's Contractor Conversation. I'm going to give everybody a chance to enter the room. As you join, say hello. You know how we was raised. When you enter the room, you speak to everybody that's in the room. So drop a hello in the chat. If you're catching this by the replay, hashtag replay, so I know that you were here. I go back and greet everyone who stopped in and left me a hello. I'm streaming live to Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course to my YouTube channel. Now, since this is a special edition of Contractors Conversation, all broadcasts of this edition will come down tomorrow at midnight, and it will solely be available on my YouTube channel at LT&A Consulting Group. That's on my YouTube channel. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I thought I would end this week with doing a little something special. I started morning tidbits. Earlier this year, the end of last year, I'm not quite sure I remember, but it was a part of my stroke recovery, quite frankly. It assisted me with regaining my speech pattern, and it was a way for me to ease back into work. But in all that time, I've kind of hinted at who I was. I did cursory introductions as to the type of work that I did, but I don't ever think I ever gave an extended introduction to who I was, why I started my company, and why you should care who I am. So here I am today. My name is Luciana Turner. I have been in the government contracting industry. Oh my goodness. I started officially in government contracting in 2015. Now, before that, I worked at a DoD think tank in Washington, D.C., starting in 2000. So if you add up all of my experience with government contracting reporting, we're talking about 22 years. I initially spent time as a financial analyst. Then I transferred into compliance. Now, compliance is where my heart resides. Compliance is essentially where you ensure that you are meeting the metrics or the rules of the contract, of the rules and regulations surrounding FAR, CAS, whatever industry that you're operating in. If you're a financial analyst, there are financial analyst rules. If you're a accountant, there are accounting rules. There are corporate rules. As I moved up in my compliance role, I found myself performing audits of 401k, payroll. I actually had to do a government audit where I had to reconcile from the employee through the project all the way out to the pay advice. I actually had to work with the banks to show where the money left our corporate account and was transferred to the employee via pay advice. So corporate compliance became an all encompassing thing. I started my company in essence. I started the L. Turner Associates. That was my first company. I started in 2014. There's a government contracting company. That's all we do in L. Turner Associates. We answer the government's need for government support services, financial services, other management services, administrative support services. All of that is through L. Turner Associates. In 2015 is where I decided to break off and hone and focus in my consulting services to businesses operating within government contracting. That was born from, as my mentor would call, divine agitation. During my time in corporate America doing compliance audits, one of the reoccurring themes was this lack of support from our small business partners. Their invoices were not always fully supported. And when I would reach out to them, there was a total lack of knowledge that they were supposed to track this information, they were supposed to keep this information, how long they were supposed to keep it. There were conversations amongst us within compliance where we would talk about FAR, and there's a FAR clause. I used to know them off the top of my head. I don't know them now. But if I took 2 or 3 minutes, I could find it. That in theory implies that the prime is supposed to audit its subs, but we all know that isn't going to happen. But how the prime is often at a disadvantage when it comes to our small business partners. And some of the program managers joined in that conversation as they were talking about how partnering with some small businesses was pulling teeth. Some of the small businesses actually felt that the prime was really going to hold their hand throughout the entire contract, not really realizing the prime has to run its own business. It doesn't have time to run your business too, which led to metrics not being met on the contract. And then the government is looking at the prime as though you're not meeting your goals. And often that was the fault of the small business because the goals not being met was the work being subbed out to the small business. So the prime ended up having to resub the work out to another company. I attended or started attending industry events where I heard small businesses complain about winning awards as a subcontractor, but not receiving the total contract value, i.e., their subcontract award might be for $100,000, but they only received $10,000 worth of work. And then I remembered those conversations that we held in our corporate offices with the program managers. And I was the compliance auditor that, nobody likes the auditor. And I knew who would answer the phone for me and who wouldn't. So in lieu of a phone call, I would just pop up in their office with my data requests. So listening to these conversations, I began to think, well, who is instructing these small businesses, these subcontractors on the proper compliance and government contracting? So I got to looking around. I looked through the SBA website. I looked through, all of the contracting events. I saw a lot about certifications. I saw a lot about writing the winning proposal. I saw a lot about how to meet and market, but there was little or nothing around actual compliance. There was little or nothing around auditing in government contracting. And what was said about auditing and government contracting, quite frankly, just wasn't true. It wasn't correct, and it was setting up the small business for absolute failure. So I started my consulting firm to address what I felt was a void and was to fill that incomplete conversation and to have that incomplete conversation that was going on in government contracting. It's okay to write the winning proposal, and even that conversation wasn't being held, in my opinion, to complete satisfaction when you're not talking about compliance. I remember when I won my first contract and having that conversation with the contracting officer. One of the things he talked about was non responsive proposal responses. I remember being frustrated with my proposal team on another proposal we was writing because I explicitly said you need to write this section this way. And when he sent it to me at midnight before it was due, he didn't follow the directions. And when I called him, it was like, what is this? He was like, well, I didn't want to write it over and over again, so I just wrote it once. It's non responsive. So even in the trainings that are out there regarding how do you write the winning proposal, and nobody is talking about responsiveness. No one is talking about the compliance of the proposal response. Nobody is talking about giving the government what they ask for in the way that it's being asked for. Everybody wants to do government contracting and everybody wants to be the win or the winner of a multi-million dollar contract, but nobody wants to do the work. No one wants to answer the mail in the manner in which it's asked because it's inconvenient. That's where a lot of my platforms came from. Contractors conversation came from wanting to have those complete conversations, redundancy, around the incompleteness that's going on in government contracts. We want to have these flashy $1 million conversations, but we don't want to talk about the unsexy part. I even have a problem with the way certifications are discussed in government contracting. It's discussed as a answer all and a cure all. It's discussed as though once you get certified, someone will give you, and no one is giving anything in the government. But I digress a little bit. So the LT&A group was born from the need to fill the void around what is being taught and what needs to be taught in the government contracting world. But then I took it a step further a couple of years later, and I did a name change to the LT&A Consulting Group. And I did that because, one, I was fighting the moniker of coach, because I feel people look at coach and they translate it as someone who's going to do the work for me. And what a coach and a consultant does is bring the information out of you and help you package it in such a way that you see your ideas framed and shaped in a package and in a strategic way. Because as my coach told me, you are the frame, and the frame never sees the picture it holds. So my job is to show you the picture you hold. but my job is never to tell you you are a frame. So then my training classes were designed to once again fill the void or the vacancy around what is it to decode an RFP. Everybody is out here looking for a template. Can I buy a template? Can I get a template from you? And then they want to play plug and play, and then they can't figure out why they're not winning the award. I saw when I want to say Polaris, but that's not the contract vehicle that was. When Eagle was out, that's a multi-million dollar IDIQ. And it had a small business set aside worth multi-million dollars. I saw this company pop up out of nowhere selling a template for it for multiple thousands of dollars, and people were buying that template. Now, it was based upon the old RFP because the new one hadn't been issued. So then I compared the current, excuse me for a second. Excuse me. Anyway, I compared that template to the new RFP. And anyone who used that template submitted a non responsive proposal. That's all I could say about that. Everybody was template, or everybody is so template focused until they're not focused on issuing and drafting a responsive proposal. And the responsiveness determines who wins and who loses. People aren't taking the time to learn what lowest price technically acceptable really means. This is not a bargain basement swap meet that the government is having. Lowest price doesn't really mean what you think it means. Take time to learn the terminology and respect the industry that you're working in. That is why LT&A was born. And that is why it's important that you know who I am. As a compliance officer within government contracting, it is my job to ensure that you, one, understand the terminology that you're running into day to day. That, two, you are prepared for when the auditor comes knocking on your door. The government does not perform timely audits. There are certain tripwires that tells the auditor that it's time for them to pay you a visit. And it's costly to fix an error when you can just prevent the error from being formed. Understanding and knowing and recognizing who I am and including me in your team allows me and allows you to create a compliant, scalable company that can grow faster because you're avoiding some of the pitfalls. I performed a talk the other day on Tidbits when I discussed how it was a cursory conversation around how the government calculates a noncompliance. Who wants to give the government back money on work that you've already performed? Far too often, there are contractors out there taking advice from current contractors. And I'm not saying that they're not good mentors, but what I am saying is a contractor who's doing work saying, trust me, I'm doing it, may not be the best person to get advice from versus someone who's been audited and gone through the audit process. I've sat through in live on another platform, and this contractor was giving out information that lacked integrity. And it lacked integrity simply because I don't believe that contractor's ever been audited. And that information would send a small business into near bankruptcy. Quite frankly, it was an auditor's delight. Because I sat in there and found and listened to them tell me exactly how to audit them to maximize my audit findings, to maximize a large refund so that the government can get back a large check. As we know, the IRS is mobilizing its auditors to seek out maximum refunds. As we understand, small businesses get audited at a higher rate than larger businesses. As we understand, the PPP Loan and Bank Fraud Act of 2022 was just signed into law by our president. So, do we not believe that all these non compliances are not going to come to light? At minimum, every government contractor needs an attorney who is well versed in government contracting, a tax planner, and a tax preparer, who are not necessarily the same thing, and a compliance officer, such as myself. 2023 is entering a new world. Flying by the seat of your pants and doing things skating the rules because ignorance of the rule is no longer going to fly. Saying I didn't know is not going to help your bank account when you have to write that check back to the government. There's an uptick in audits on the way, actually being implemented as we speak, because even DCAA, which is the Defense Contract Audit Agency, they are the agency that audits contractors. They have been given marching orders to uptick their audits on everybody in government contracting making over $75,000. And that is the tripwire that make you cast covered. If I'm saying or using language that you're not familiar with, you should be in my upcoming training classes. You cannot be an effective and efficient government contractor if you do not understand the language. And I'll stand 10 toes down on that. So to wrap this up, I have a training class out, Decoding the RFP. The link is in the description, where I help you break down the request, develop a proposal template, create what I like to call standard responses so that you can use those responses in similar proposals coming down the road. Because in government contracting, we do not work harder, we work efficiently. I will also, if time permits, address some of the common pitfalls and what part of the RFP is included in the contract, whether direct mentioned or by, reference. I have a series of other trainings coming out. So if you just want to jump on my mailing list to stay in the know of what's coming out, you can do that as well. So I'm going to close out today with this. As you enter the weekend, as business owners reflect on this final quarter, Our strategic plan for the new year should be pretty much firmed up. If it isn't, one of the things in your strategic plan, should be an operational budget, which includes consultants, mentors, and training. Click the link, get on my calendar so we can discuss ways that we can work together in the coming year and how I can help you scale your contracting business and make it what you envisioned when you opened your doors. Have an amazing weekend, and I will see you Monday morning for a new installment of Morning Tidbits at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have an amazing day and a restful weekend.